Hello and welcome to Counterculture. I'm Peter Whittle, and a very belated Happy New Year to you if you're just joining us. Well, we're starting the year with a subject that we've covered many times on this programme and will continue to, and that's the BBC. Last week there was a new survey out which showed that the number of people in this country who felt that the BBC represented their values and their views had fallen quite dramatically again to 48%. That is really quite a big number. This is all happening at a time when the BBC is apparently trying to get its house in order in terms of bias. It's got a new Director General, but is this really going to make any difference? Is the BBC actually even capable of changing in this way? And if it isn't, what should happen to it? Also, last week, we had another survey out which affects the TV world, and that is the TV regulator Ofcom hugely expanded its definition of hate speech on television. This has ramifications, of course, throughout the industry. And I am going to discuss both of these issues today with two people very well qualified to talk about them. First of all, Calvin Robinson, who is from the Defund the BBC campaign, who's also becoming very well known to us now as a commentator and indeed contributor to the national press, and Alice Grant, who is a Conservative candidate and indeed has written for the iPaper. Thanks very much, both of you. Can I start with you actually, Alice? When they come up with these sort of figures, 48% of people think the BBC no longer reflects their values. Does it surprise you? Does that figure surprise you?
Really not at all. I mean, the BBC has been so clearly biased now for so long. The way they covered Brexit, the way they cover politics in general is so left-wing that really it's no surprise, I think, that the country feels as though this corporation no longer reflects its values, or let alone its outlook on the world.
But it seems to be, does it not, Calvin, a very much an outside of London thing. From the figures, it seems to be, various regions outside of the capital.
Absolutely. I'd go further than what Alice said and say it's not actually a left-wing agenda at the BBC. They have their own political agenda. It's very metropolitan liberal elite. It's very Westminster bubble-based, and anyone outside of that falls outside of those views. And you see now a minority of people feel like their views are represented at the BBC, because most people in this country are small C conservative, common sense British values, and that is not what we see on BBC content.
But you see, when we talk about bias, there is still this thing. Well, you talk about Brexit, for example, that somehow or other, if we have more, say, like pro-Brexit voices on, that would be better, which of course it would have been. A bit late now. But it's a bit wider than that, is it not? I mean, when you talk about values, it goes through other things. It goes through the general output of the BBC, drama and comedy. Do you not think?
Definitely. I think comedy is a really huge one. I think if you look, in the last couple decades, the change in British comedy has been so great. And I think it'd be fair to say that nowadays, all the BBC comedy is very left-wing, and it targets the establishment. It targets the people, not the establishment, which is why it's not funny at all. Whereas in the past, we had great comedians like Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, and we had fantastic shows like Blackadder, Monty Python, Fawlty Towers, which really, I think, resonated with the British public. And now it's all really been diminished and destroyed by an establishment obsessed with just making the people feel as though we're just these racist Brexit voters, and it's such a shame, because we had such great talent in this country, I think, and we just don't get that level of comedy on TV anymore.
Actually, it's a very good point Alice makes there, Carmen. She said it's actually not the establishment that's a target, it's the people. That is a big turnaround, isn't it?
Well, it is, if you consider that 3/4 of the comedians that have been on the BBC recently are left-wing, and that doesn't mean that a quarter of them were right-wing. I think it was only about 1% that were right-leaning. The others were undeclared. This is a recent piece of research from the Common Sense campaign. So yes, the BBC is constantly pushing their own values and their own views on their audience, and they're making fun of their audience because, as we all know, Brexiteers are xenophobic, racist, ignorant people. and the BBC will allow comedians to come on and berate them left, right, and centre, but they won't have any balance on there. Why is that?
There isn't this. They've just put a warning, I believe, on Dad's Army. Isn't this right? They put.
Unbelievable.
What was that actually, Alice? What did they do?
I'm not entirely sure, but I do know that yes, they're constantly going back and censoring old programmes. And I think what's very interesting to me is that what I feel is that the young generation actually, we disagree very much with censorship. At least I know that. For me, at least, I feel as though it's ridiculous to try to go back and to, I guess, change the past just because it doesn't fit in with this modern woke leftist agenda.
But when you say young people don't agree with censorship, I beg to differ, I'm afraid, speaking as an old person. It seems to me that actually younger people are remarkably tolerant of censorship, no?
I agree. I think they've grown up with it. It's a normal thing now. When you find something offensive, you shut it down. You no platform it. You don't challenge it anymore. That is the approach that we're seeing in schools, in universities. So, of course, young people are used to this. When they see something they find quite upsetting, they want it gone. And we're looking at programs from 30, 40 years ago and looking at them through modern standards. And of course, there's going to be some jokes that we now find inappropriate, but that's how society progresses. And to say that these programs are no longer suitable for a mainstream audience is bonkers. It is kind of, it's the thought piece, isn't it? You can't handle this stuff, so we're not going to give it to you.
I think I'd say that there's so much censorship though. It's got to the point where even my generation can see the effect that this has had on creativity and on the freedom to create art, because we're living in such a bleak, artistically devoid world in our statues, in the art that's been created in galleries, and not least on television and on the programmes. And I think, it's pretty clear now, I think, that we've gone so far in a kind of extreme, almost communist Soviet-style direction of censoring art, of making sure it conforms to this mould of what's acceptable. That I'd like to think, at least, there must be more people like me who realise that this cannot go on. This isn't feasible, especially something as important as art and creativity. We've lost so much, and I think I'm hopeful for the future, I'd say, because it can't go on like this. It would be so dreary.
No, this is sort of, I would agree with that. Calvin, obviously you're part of the Defund the BBC campaign. First of all, can you explain to us, when you say defund, what actually does your campaign mean by that?
Well, it means we need to shake things up. It means that we can no longer expect to pay the BBC for the privilege of watching other channels and other content on other stations. For example, why do we have to pay the BBC to watch ITV or Sky News or any other channel or station that's in real time? It doesn't make sense. So we need to change that remit. We need to defund. Actually, you need to find another revenue model. You need to find a new business model, because you can't charge people a television tax under threat of imprisonment for watching content that has nothing to do with you, and you haven't produced it.
So, but basically, I've got to square this circle. Your objection, which I would totally agree with, obviously it seems logical in this day and age, but it seems to be a commercial one. But up until now, we've been talking about, the terrible political kind of bias in the BBC. They would be forgiven for thinking, would they not, that actually the commercial consideration is just a cover. Actually, it's because we don't like what they are politically now. What would you say to that?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's both. So a lot of the reason why people are so unhappy paying the TV tax to the BBC, regardless of watching their content, is because the BBC is so busy pushing out this woke bias in everything they do. Like Alice mentioned, it's in entertainment and everything. It's not just in their informative content anymore. They have an agenda, and it's become very clear. And I think people on the left and people on the right are getting sick of being lectured in everything they watch. So it ties in very closely, the economic side of it as well as the bias side of it.
Yeah. Well, it's not value for money anymore, I would say. If we're paying a licence fee, and especially I'm thinking of the very elderly as well, and obviously across all generations, it just feels as though if we're not enjoying anything on the BBC entertainment-wise, and if the news reporting is blatantly biased, and this organisation is still masquerading as an impartial broadcaster. It makes no sense, and it's actually, it desperately needs reform. I just wonder if that's even possible at this point. It's gone so far.
Can I ask you then, I mean, I've sort of asked you, Calvin, but I mean, just again, what therefore do you want to see? I mean, when you say, so do you want there to be a reduced licence fee or no licence fee, or, you know, some people, hardline people, want to scrap the BBC, whatever that means? What would you like to see, you know, if in an ideal world for you?
Well, our campaign has three main aims. So the first aim is to educate people on what they can and can't watch with or without a TV license, so people have options. The second aim is decriminalisation of non-payment of the licence, which we were so close with. A lot of parliamentarians are backing us, and the Prime Minister was one of them. He performed a U-turn recently and said he's not going to follow this through for whatever reason. We're still chasing this up, trying to find out why. And the third goal is a commitment from the BBC to change its Royal Charter so that it only covers BBC content. So we're only paying for things that they produce and not paying for the privilege of watching our own television.
I see. Actually, Calvin just mentioned that you're standing as a Conservative candidate, I believe, this year, if all goes to plan with the elections and everything. What do you make of this thing whereby Boris Johnson and the government made all these noises about decriminalising the licence fee, and then suddenly, like so much else, it seems to me, sort of like suddenly faded away?
Yeah, very typical of the political class, I think. Obviously, I feel extremely passionate that the Conservative government, at least they claim to be Conservative, must act. This is the British National Broadcasting Corporation. It is thus, I think, the government's duty to step in at this point and to reform. It's such a shame, and also perhaps quite even unsurprising that they haven't, but despite that 80 seat majority in the Houses of Parliament, they don't seem to be acting at all on Conservative principles and seeking to reverse this takeover of all our institutions. They should really be stepping in, but I'm not sure, I think.
I must say it's refreshing to hear a Conservative candidate talking like that.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say, be careful of your position on the list.
To me, I think that we need to continue to scrutinise our government. Obviously, I am a Conservative Party member, and I'm proud of that, and a patriot. But I feel as though there is a lot to be done, and the Conservative Party do need reform, and we need to go back to these Conservative principles, because that is what the people of this nation voted for in the last general election. They voted for a return to patriotism and to Conservative values. And if this government doesn't deliver that, I'm very worried for not only, you know, the future of our country, but also for democracy itself, because that's very important that we remain true, I think, to Conservative values.
Do you think, have you kind of given up with this government, Calvin? I mean, on these issues?
It depends what day you ask me, Peter, to be honest. You know, we got Brexit done. That was fantastic. I'm over the moon about that. But the way they've handled COVID-19 with the lockdowns, the removal of civil liberties, not giving us an end date, all the U-turns, closing schools, denying children of education, all of this stuff is so upsetting to me and so abhorrent and so anti-conservative and quite anti-British, to be honest. So it's difficult to remain loyal to the government that I helped get elected.
Yeah.
So it depends what day you ask me on how I feel about them, but they've done some good stuff and they've done some terrible stuff.
Do you know,
but it would have been worse if Corbyn had come in.
We're talking about the BBC, and people say, well, you don't have to watch it, for example. But of course, it's really not the point. You have to pay for it on threat of jail. The thing is that television generally, in my perception, particularly when it comes to politics and the news, has gone entirely, you know, to the left. I'm talking about Sky News now, and obviously Channel 4 News. But what I wanted to just talk about briefly, something that affects the BBC and all broadcasters, and this is Ofcom, which is the regulator of broadcast television. And they have come up recently with this new definition of hate speech on television. I'm going to read it so that we all know what we're talking about. You know, otherwise, you know, it's all a bit of a mystery. But let me just read this to you. This is Ofcom, right? The new definition of hate speech runs as follows: all forms of expression which spread, incite, promote, or justify hatred based on intolerance on the grounds of disability, ethnicity, social origin, sex, gender, gender reassignment, nationality, race, religion or belief, sexual orientation, colour, genetic features, language, political or any other opinion, membership of a national minority, property, birth or age. Now, that is, I think we'd agree, covers the waterfront pretty much in subject. The thing that actually surprised me most about this was this line towards the end, political or any other opinion. Now, if you follow that through, that means that presumably one can't, fiercely disagree with somebody, because you would be surely seen to be maybe stoking hatred towards them. Would you agree?
Well, I think there are some opinions we need to be intolerant of, and that's not hatred. I don't understand the purpose of hate speech. It seems to be a way of controlling people's thoughts and what they say. And again, that's, we're in 1984, which we're seeing a lot over the last couple of years. But all of those categories, there are far too many of them, more so than in the Equalities Act. So there are more protected characteristics in this hate speech Ofcom document than there are in the government's Equalities Act. How does that make any sense? What are we protecting here? Who are we protecting? Snowflakes? People's right to be offended? And it is a right. People have the right to choose to be offended because it's a free country and we have freedom of speech, or we used to have freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And we're shutting it down. It's very concerning. What happens when you can no longer talk, when you can no longer express your opinions in public? You go underground, and that's where extremism boils. And nobody wants extremism.
That's very true. I think also another thing, I'm sure that this won't be applied to actually perhaps, the people of this country, people who are constantly called racist and white old men by the establishment. But this is going to, again, be applied to just fuel more division in our society, to pit us against each other. And that's really distressing to see, especially because if this is to apply for TV, as I said, this will totally kill any creativity and the ability to create entertainment and comedy. I mean, how can you write a comedy piece following these guidelines? It would mean you basically can't make any jokes against anyone, and it's just ridiculous.
But, I mean, without wishing to sound too, tinfoil hattish here, I mean, isn't that maybe the point of it? Isn't that maybe the motive, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, definitely, to sow more division, instead of trying to unify the country, trying to divide. And I think that's the saddest thing, that television used to unify our nation. You could expect everyone on the street to be watching, the same show at a particular time at night.
But that's gone anyway because of technical changes. I mean, that would not happen now. I mean, you've only got to look at the Christmas ratings. I mean, look, you trust me, in the 1980s, Christmas ratings for EastEnders would be about 25 million, right? Now they're 3.5 million. And that's in the top 10. That's in the top 10. So that's gone anyway. But, I mean, do you think, Calvin, Alice was more, I think, implying there, I mean, do you think that the motives for this are malign? I mean, or are they, if one's going to give them the benefit of the doubt, do you think people are just hopelessly well-meaning when they do this kind of definition or not?
Completely. I think they're 100% misguided. They think they're doing the right thing, because they're all, again, so woke. And I hate to overuse the word, it's the best word at describing this. And you'll find that once this is in place, they'll only apply these rules to one side. So it will still be okay to make race jokes about white people, for example, or it will still be okay to make jokes about Donald Trump or Boris Johnson. Making fun of the right, making fun of the majority is okay, but not the other way around. And I put out a tweet today, actually, because I've received since Black Lives Matter started, I've received so much racial abuse from the woke, from the hard left. People who call themselves racists will call me things like coon and house nigger and Uncle Tom and coconut and bounty, and nothing happens. These tweets stay up there. Not that I'm asking for censorship, but I'm just highlighting the hypocrisy, because if you say anything in the other direction, of course you get instantly banned or instantly shut down or no platform. It's all one-sided. It's not fair and balanced. It's not just. That's the issue I have with this. If you're going to implement horrible totalitarian rules like this, at least be fair across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that matters a lot to the British people is fairness and justice, and these rules will not be applied in that way. We know this from just experience. So many times we've seen this kind of two-tier system within the establishment where something goes, if it's BLM, if it's leftist, if it's against white people, and then on the other hand, if anything is well,
Yes, yeah.
yeah, there is a two-tier.
Yes, no, I'd undoubtedly agree. I mean, having been in the midst of the Brexit campaign, pretty much at the forefront of it, you become very, very aware of this. I just think, just I want to ruminate just finally, is that, even though Alice, you're here talking, Calvin, we all are on Twitter talking all the time, this sort of restriction seems to be intensifying. I mean, we're all very angry about it, but it doesn't. This is the comments we get on our channel is, what do we do, right? What do we do about it in that case? Okay, you're offering to defund the BBC. That's your offer, as it were, Calvin. But this is the thing people say more than anything. It's all very well. We're talking about it, and it's great. We answer. What can we do? I mean, can people vote for you, say, under the assumption that this will mean that something will happen, for example? Can they really do that? I mean, do you have confidence in?
Well, I think with the BBC and with the establishment in general, the problem is so deep-rooted, and it's been going on for so long. I mean, this is rotten to the core, our political establishment, in so many ways. And this is going to take many, many years. I think, like Brexit, it's one of those things that will take many years until we can finally see the full implementation and the results of it. But I can only hope that more people will have, I guess, the courage to stand up and to fight for what they believe is right, and for justice and for fairness. And I think that's something that motivates me in politics, certainly, is that obviously what's going on is unacceptable. And that's why I guess I'm choosing to stand up. I know what I'm doing is very, very small and really nothing in the great scheme of things.
Well, no, but I mean, one's got to do something. We're all doing something, aren't we? I mean, the
point is, as Calvin as well, with his movement to defund the BBC and his organisation, that's incredible. And I think, ultimately, like Brexit, which took so many years to finally apply enough pressure to get it done, it's something that's going to have to take a lot of time, a lot of effort, and hopefully courageous people in the future, leaders that will actually fight for this nation and for patriotism and for our values.
Would you? I mean, Calvin, I think we'd both agree with that. What would you say, could be done if someone said to you, "What do we do about this?" We started off by talking about the BBC, but we're also talking effectively about freedom of opinion and this. So basically, what would you do? I mean, what practical steps could there be?
I think, first of all, we have to recognise that this is a war. When people say it's hyperbole to talk about the culture wars, but this is a war for everything we stand for as a nation, for British values, for Christian values even, for democracy, parliamentary democracy, all the ideas that we've seen around the world. And the hard left are fighting to break down our way of life and rebuild it in their neo-Marxist image, and we don't want that. So first of all, we have to recognise that. Then secondly, we have to stand up. And it doesn't matter if you have 2 Twitter followers or 200,000. It doesn't matter if you're writing letters to the Telegraph or writing comment pieces in the Telegraph or whatever newspaper you read or write. I think everyone has to stand up, make a stand. People need to stop having anonymous accounts, put your photograph there, and then your job title, own it, own your opinion, so that people realize that normal people have these normal opinions and we back them 100%. And we've all got to stand up together. They can't cancel all of us. That's what I say.
That's very true, and I think that they're trying to create this to be the new normal, the fact that you can't speak against anyone or anything or any characteristic, which is just ridiculous. But if this is what's deemed as totally acceptable and actually the normal way to go about life, I think that we do need to definitely rise up and say, actually, no, this is totalitarian, as you said. This is right out of the Communist Manifesto, completely censoring our freedom of speech and our ability to just declare our opinions. And if you're offended, well, I'm sorry, but you know, you have to just grow thicker skin because this is life, and this isn't normal. And the fact that they're parading this as normal is very wrong, and I think we do definitely need to stand up.
I would sort of agree with you, but I think as well that quite often people dismiss certain things. Oh, what's the point? Actually, there is a point, because, you know, we run this thing called Save Our Statues, and quite often when there has been, for example, a review by one of these councils, and they want a people's opinion, we have been able to say to people, write to them, please write to them. And in fact, it's actually made a difference. You know, I mean, I almost say that quietly because I don't want it to start going wrong, you know. But in fact, you know, that is what you can do. And people say, well, how do I do it? And you can actually take them through what they should maybe do, you know. Alice, thank you very, very much indeed. Calvin, thank you very much. Happy New Year.
Pleasure.
And all strength to your bows in the future, in the coming year. Thanks for joining me. Thanks, that's the very first Counterculture for 2021. And we shall see you next time. Thank you. Bye.